you are. What you can do is go safety. So you use those.
Perfect.
Welcome back. We'll continue with our next committee, which is Committee of the Whole. We have several items before us today. The first one is a presentation on the Pedestrian Awareness Campaign. The 2012 Pedestrian Master Plan established the policy framework for more than $46 million in engineered pedestrian improvements spread out over many years. The plan also identifies program recommendations for enforcement and education. When effectively combined, the 3 E's of education, enforcement, and engineering are proven measures in reducing the number and the severity of collisions between pedestrians and vehicles, because when that happens, pedestrian always loses. Staff are developing an education and enforcement campaign to be implemented in the spring of 2016. The purpose is to help renew awareness of rules of the road and best practices to reduce the potential of being involved in a collision. Bellingham Police, Public Works staff, and Washington State Traffic Safety Commission staff will make a short presentation about the campaign. I see our Public Works Director, Mr. Ted Carlson.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ted Carlson, Public Works. I think the summary statement did a good job of introducing why we're here today. We do spend a lot of time talking about the capital side of pedestrian safety and transportation safety, and we've done a good job of building sidewalks and crossings and doing other things through engineering and construction to try to create a safer transportation system. But as Council President Lillquist mentioned, there's another part or several other parts to pedestrian and vehicle safety having to do with traffic enforcement and education and outreach. And so we wanted to talk a little bit today about what we're doing in those other aspects. Obviously, we'll continue to work on building sidewalks and crossings using the Transportation Benefit District revenue to do that, as well as other grant revenues and street fund revenue. And we'll be coming back to Council probably in the next couple meetings and giving an update on Transportation Benefit District, what we've done in terms of sidewalk construction and crossings, those hard physical improvements. But today, we just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the outreach program that we're working on. As was mentioned, we have both Public Works staff as well as Police Department staff, and we're fortunate enough to have Doug Dahl here from the Washington Traffic Safety Commission talking a little bit about what's happening on the grander scale through the state and their Target Zero program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kim and go through a brief presentation.
Thank you. Kim Brown, Public Works. Want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about the upcoming pedestrian safety campaign. As Ted mentioned, this is part of an ongoing traffic safety education program, with this initial focus being on pedestrian and motor vehicle collisions. So in the last 2 months, we've had 4 collisions between pedestrians and motor vehicles in marked crosswalks. We had 1 between a motorist and a bicyclist. Each of these collisions was avoidable. Each resulted in injury, including 1 pedestrian death and 1 bicyclist fatality. Ensuring safety on our streets is everyone's responsibility, and we want to work together as a community on this. Even 1 preventable collision is 1 too many. So to increase responsible behavior, reduce distractions, and prevent avoidable collisions, we're engaging with the community to raise awareness and participation in safe travel. So we will be doing this through an education and enforcement campaign, and this is all to protect our most vulnerable road users. So this is just an outline of what we've been doing. We took a look at reviewed data, collision data, very in-depth. We've set goals and objectives based on what the information we reviewed, research best practices, and through that review, develop strategies and tactics that will apply specifically to Bellingham. This problem is not unique to Bellingham. It's happening in many communities. And through that, our strategies and tactics, we are then going to evaluate how effective our campaign is, whether we're seeing the results that we want. So we looked at WSDOT, Washington State Department of Transportation, collision data for the last 5 years. This is 2012 to 2016, looking at motor vehicle pedestrian collision, officer-reported collisions. And as you can see, the majority are happening on our arterial streets. This is West Bakerview, Meridian, along Woburn, Alabama. We're seeing them James Street, Samish Way, with the majority in built-up commercial areas or commercial mixed commercial multifamily. And again, this is just showing where the collisions are occurring in terms of zoning. It's in our commercial.
Excuse me, Kim, we have a question from a council member.
Oh.
Hey, sorry, can you define pedestrian? Because we were talking about bicycles as well. So is this just vehicles and people walking, or is this bicycle incidents as well? Can you define
Sure.
the definition for these?
Yes.
Thank you.
This campaign is focusing specifically on motor vehicle pedestrian collisions. And so this data does not include bicycle collisions. We have that data if you'd like to see it. But this is specifically on pedestrian. So again, this is showing that collisions are occurring in our dense areas where we've got a lot of commercial activity, high pedestrian and motor vehicle volumes. So where are the collisions occurring in the roadway? The majority are happening at intersections. And within the intersections, the type of pedestrian facility being used is the majority are happening within marked crosswalks. And just a little information here in terms of what is included in non-intersection in terms of the roadway location. That can be mid-block, mid-block crosswalk, or just outside of an intersection. And the 21% roadway for the pedestrian facility used is looking at non-intersections in the middle of the roadway, somebody coming from behind a parked car, or at an intersection when somebody is not in the marked crosswalk. So we looked at daylight conditions, time of day, time of year, and in terms of lighting conditions, when you put together dusk and dark, it's pretty even split between daylight and dark conditions of darkness. Time of day, the majority are occurring between 12 noon and about 7 p.m., with the highest numbers being between about 5 and 7 p.m. And then time of year, as we'd expect in the fall, shorter days, October, November, December, and January, February included with that. April, I'm not sure what's happening with, not you, April, but we see a real drop in the month of April. It's just kind of an anomaly. In terms of ages of both the pedestrian involved in the collision and motor vehicle driver, the highest percentage is for pedestrians being involved in the collision is with the 20 to 29-year-old age range. And for motorists, it's the 21 to 25-year-old. outside of that, in terms of driver age, really, and pedestrian age, it's pretty evenly split. But we are looking at, it's interesting, I would have expected the 16 to 20-year-old to be a higher spike, but I guess people are feeling like they know everything by the time they're 21, and they need to be a little more careful. So here's the splits in terms of drivers. Majority are male. And in terms of the pedestrians, it's a pretty even split between those involved in collisions who are male, female. And we also looked at contributing circumstances. This is what behavior of either the driver or the pedestrian was a factor in the collision occurring. For motor vehicle drivers, the most common was failure to yield to the pedestrian. And most of those were at intersections, turning movements, either a left or right turn. Inattention was a fairly big factor. None for both categories just means there was no behavior on the part of the driver or the pedestrian that contributed to the collision, at least as reported in the traffic report. So with the driver contributing circumstances the 16% had to do with either interacting with a passenger in the vehicle or an unknown distraction. It was clear the driver was distracted, but it wasn't determined what that was. And again, with the pedestrian, the majority of collisions, the pedestrian did not, there wasn't a behavior that contributed to that as recorded in the report. And the most common factors that were involved in the collision was either not granting right-of-way to the motor vehicle, or the other category included failure to use a crosswalk, disregarding a traffic signal, crossing at a non-intersection. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Doug Dahl. If you want to come up here, Doug. He's our Target Zero manager with the Washington Traffic Safety Commission.
Good afternoon. So our goal is zero pedestrian motor vehicle collisions. Is that ambitious? Yes. Washington is what we call a Target Zero state. The Washington Traffic Safety Commission several years ago adopted Target Zero as their approach towards serious injury and fatal crashes. And what that means is essentially that our goal is zero fatal crashes, zero serious injury crashes in Washington. The reason we've settled on the numbers on zero is because that's really the only, if you ask your family what's the acceptable number of people you're willing to have die in a traffic crash, that number is going to be zero. And so we feel that that's the right number. So in this particular situation, how we intend to do that is through increasing responsible behaviors and reducing distractions. And we have a couple strategies. The first strategy, we want to encourage Bellingham residents and visitors to travel with care. Oftentimes you'll see traffic safety messages that focus on tragedy and destruction. Those tend to not be that effective. What tends to be more effective is encouraging people to participate in positive social behavior. It's more likely to change behavior. And so what we'd like to do is use PSAs, video PSAs, radio ads, social media, really any medium that we can to put a message up to our community that says that we're encouraging them to travel with care, whether you're a pedestrian or a driver. And then the other aspect is education. You would think by now that the message of how to behave in an intersection had penetrated the community, but I also write the articles weekly in the Herald, and I can guarantee you that it has not, based on the questions I get. And so it is important, if we're going to be doing enforcement, that we are really clear about what the expectations are about how you approach an intersection, what the law says as a driver or a pedestrian, and then also what safe behaviors are. Because as a pedestrian, you can have the right of way, but that doesn't mean much if somebody else disregarded that as a driver. So both understanding the law and understanding how to safely navigate, particularly as a pedestrian, when somebody else maybe doesn't give you the right of way that was legally yours. And so again, we'll use PSAs and social media and a variety of different channels to try and reach as broad a part of the community as we can with those messages. And I'm going to turn that over to Carr now.
I'm Carl Lanham. I am the sergeant in charge of the traffic unit, which is comprised of 6 of our officers on motorcycles that focus on traffic safety within the city of Bellingham. I'm here to talk about the enforcement component of this, but I want to stress, as Kim and Doug have talked about, that to the PSAs and the social norming, we really want to encourage responsible behavior and encourage those people to have voluntary compliance with those laws. That's really our first goal, is to try and get that voluntary compliance. But for those who don't want to have a responsible behavior, we'll be conducting extra patrols for focusing on crosswalks where those collisions are occurring, also on speed compliance and distracted driving. Some of the things our traffic officers are already doing out there are emphasizing the school zones. They also focus on the high traffic area and complaints, along with the multiple other duties. So this effort is going to be specifically focused on trying to focus on those crosswalks where those collisions are occurring. How are we going to do that? With the extra effort or the extra funds, we'll be able to get officers out there kind of focusing on some of the crosswalks either in pairs or individually, but we'll also be doing a team effort. We'll have all the officers spread out into an area and then have an officer in plain clothes with a radio watching for illegal behavior and then calling it out to the traffic officers. Key point of this is that there's not going to be any surprises. We're going to be advertising where we're doing this and what we're doing. Because again, what we want to encourage is people to have responsible behavior and have voluntary compliance with the laws. So that's our goal with this. Any questions?
Council, any questions? Dan.
What's the time frame on this, and how long is this a permanent program, or how does that work?
We're going to try and start here at the end of April and focus as much as we can through the summer months. And of course, looking at the data that Kim has pulled up, we're going to try and focus on those times when those accidents are occurring.
Thank you.
Roxanne?
We're not quite done.
Oh,
But if you have a question for Carr, go ahead and ask that. No.
okay, we'll come back to questions then.
Okay. Oops, I'm going to leave the third.
Sorry about that.
1, 2, 3.
Okay. We will do evaluation at the end of this initial portion of the campaign. We'll be looking at how much monitoring activity with social media, website traffic, enforcement, the number of citations given, and reinforcement, if you have wondering what that means. If you have ever been to any of our elementary school drop-off and pickup times, I guarantee you will, and I know Carr can second this, see some of the worst driving behavior out there. So that's one of the areas that we will also be targeting and encouraging responsible driving behavior. But the reinforcement, which can be done in an area like that, is officers making contact, personal contact with people and saying, great, you did the right thing. That was, stopping before the crosswalk, not blocking it, letting your child out on the right side of the street. We want to get that dialogue happening so it's positive enforcement along with regular, or citations, regular. Also, we're going to be continuing to monitor collision data in detail and monitoring pedestrian activity. We do our annual bicycle and pedestrian counts, and we know where we have, that's at 18 locations around the city, but we keep tabs on where we're seeing a lot of pedestrian activity, and of course then we'll look at that along with our collision data. So are there questions?
Okay, now we can do questions. Roxanne.
Well, I just really wanted to thank the state and the departments. You know, I've been really worried about this as I've been reading the news as of late, and it's such a mixed bag of things to go through, because I know some community members will just say, well, why don't you just restripe the crosswalks? And that's not necessarily always the answer, and the false sense of security that that would create. You also read things about wearing bright colors and cars being attracted to striking the bright color in the subconscious. So the point is awareness, and always being aware of your surroundings as a driver, as a pedestrian, or on your bike. And I just wanted to say my heart really goes out to the families that have lost our community members and anybody who has been injured because of this, which is why I'm even more in support of this campaign.
April?
So I have a couple questions. I'll start with one and then see how far the president lets me go before I have to let somebody else. As far as the enforcement around crosswalks and schools, when we saw the map, it was mostly commercial multifamily. So I'm just interested in, I mean, I think it's great, and we're always calling to have enforcement and encouraging behavior around schools, but why not focus in those areas where, right at Bakerview, Northwest is a huge one, along Sandwich Corridor is a very big one.
What we're doing right now is the officers themselves on regular duty will focus on the crosswalks in the school zones. And that's something we're already doing.
Yeah.
With this grant now, we're going to do just what you're talking about, is trying to focus on those areas where we can now, with more time and funds, go out and focus on those areas.
Okay, and my real interest, so the Seatbelt Campaign, it came out, and it was children. People focused on children and got children to be the police inside the cars. And it's kind of the same, I would think, with a lot of this in actually taking it a step further and going into the schools, and whether it's a count to 3, get your parents to stop for 3 seconds to stop. I mean, you can create little monsters inside of cars, and they make us do behavior, the children actually do. So I would be interested in your campaign really focusing at something catchy for children that we would be encouraging and teaching in the schools and partnering through the campaign.
I think you've touched on a really good point, and because kids they know right and wrong, and if they, mom, put that, or dad, put that cell phone in the back of the car, put it away, what behaviors are we modeling for our kids? Certainly.
Pinky?
Thank you. This is a very interesting presentation. I'm curious, since the highest majority of driver accidents is between the ages of 21 and 25, and I'm thinking we have a very high population, especially in our higher ed here. I'm curious how we're working with the colleges and universities, because I'm guessing that is our biggest focus group of the majority of incidences. So I'm curious how we're going to be working with those entities.
And we will be coordinating with Western and Whatcom Community College. I've worked with Western Police before on this, and I'll be relying on our police department to help with that as well. But we also need to focus on not only the age of the driver, but where they're occurring most often. And it's interesting that they're not occurring right there, like in terms of Western, they're not occurring right there. But of course, people are driving all over.
Right, we do have BTC as well, and the community college, and people live everywhere throughout the city, so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Terry?
Yeah, I basically want to just comment on what Roxanne had to say, because I really think that awareness part is so true. I've been almost hit numerous times downtown in the past, and I'm downtown a lot. And I've learned that, before I step off, and I stare hard. I try to see their eyes and get their attention, and I don't trust anyone that they're going to come through. And in the age of cell phones, I hope part of this pedestrian education is on the pedestrian. It drives me nuts to see how many unaware people are walking across the intersections with a cell phone in their face and totally unaware of the surroundings. And, we can't assume any driver, is going to stop, even though we have the right of way.
Right.
And I think that part we have to educate as well. Leave those damn phones off when you're out there trying to walk or drive.
And distraction is one area that we will be focusing on for both pedestrians and drivers, because it's a problem with both, certainly.
It is.
Dan?
Is there an opportunity cost on this enhanced enforcement? Is there something that doesn't get done because officers are redirected to this type of enforcement?
We're going to be using some of the traffic operations funds in the Public Works Department, and that's money that's used for operation and maintenance of our transportation system. So everything from our pavement markings to signage to signal maintenance, and we'll be using some of the unspent money having to do with vacancies. So we're trying to use money that's existing within the Public Works budget and partnering with the police department to provide this additional enforcement. So always, if you redirect money, I mean, it's a matter of priority, but we felt like, given where we're at and what we're trying to accomplish, it was a good use of Public Works transportation money to work with the police department on this additional enforcement. So we're spreading it across the department. There may be some things that get deferred a little bit, but we feel like it's the highest priority at this point.
Thanks.
Gene?
Just a comment and a question for Carr. I think we should have bicyclists in here, and I'll tell you why. I see bicyclists go through four-way stops constantly, like cars. I see them go through two-way stop signs. When I leave City Hall and go towards Cornwall, I'm shocked at how many people will come through a two-way stop on a bike. I've been hit. The side of my car's been hit by a bike. I'm very supportive of the bicycle car. If you see a bicyclist run through a stop sign, will you? Because I've said politely, don't do that, and I get the proverbial finger wave, which that's up to them. But
when we do these enforcements, we'll be looking for all of those. And when we first started this, it was mostly the pedestrians is where we focused our efforts. But of course, the recent bicycle fatality kind of could redirect our efforts a little bit. But when we're out there doing these enforcements, we'll be trying to get all sorts of reasonable behavior corrected.
Thanks.
April?
So at the end of my tenure with the Birchwood neighborhood, we were nearly to copying what the Columbia neighborhood did years back, and it was called a PACE car program. So we started working with Campus Coalition, but just the cost and how to get that together ended up being very difficult for just a neighborhood. But I mean, we can try to change people's behaviors, but people are going to do what they do, and it's really having examples out there so that you see certain people actually stopping and then other people stop behind them, and people that drive the speed limit and commit. And that was the PACE Park program, which you probably remember. You would get a sticker or like a little thing to hang up, and you were the PACE car. So you were signing something, committing that you were going to go the speed limit throughout the city, and especially in your own neighborhood. So it would always slow all the cars behind you, like BTC and things like that. So if you're considering different campaigns within part of this, I think that would be neat to look at and see if you could rejuvenate it. And I know Campus Coalition was interested in working with that as well. So
Definitely. We'll take.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's very important. Unfortunately, I was in Seattle the other day, and I almost hit a pedestrian. There was so much going on. It's a new part of town, and I had to slam on the brakes. I came too close, several feet away from a pedestrian who was in a marked crosswalk. So, I wasn't on a cell phone or anything, but it can still happen, and so we all need to be careful. Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next item on the menu, which is a Post Point Treatment Plant Biosolids Project Update. Okay, Ted, this is you again. This has to do with our sewage treatment plant. Evaluations of the incinerators at Post Point demonstrate that the equipment has reached the end of its useful life and needs replacement. These things are ancient-looking beasts. Building on previous biosolids options studies the city had conducted, the city has retained Brown and Caldwell to further develop a digestion alternative. The study will result in both engineering design and long-term O&M, that is operation and maintenance programming. The project team is proposing to use the triple bottom line plus, which was the same procedure used for the expansion recently, which is our usual triple bottom line and also a technical analysis, to evaluate options available for digestion of our solids. Staff will offer a presentation on the proposed TBL criteria and seek council direction to confirm consistency with the city's legacies and strategic commitments. We'll go ahead and begin that presentation. Ted, you want to start off again?
Yes, thank you. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. Again, I think that was a good setup for the discussion today. By way of reminder, the council remembers we just finished recent upgrades to Post Point, to the wastewater treatment plant. That was looking at our secondary treatment process, focusing on the liquid side of the process. And going back even before that, we've been looking at what we need to do on the solids handling side of the treatment process. And as Michael mentioned, we currently have 2 multiple hearth furnaces. They're getting older, in one case beyond the useful life, so we know we need to replace that infrastructure. We also know that when we look at the community's legacy statements and what we'd like to see as a community, incineration is not the way we'd like to move forward with handling our solids down at Post Point. And going back to the 2007 Climate Action Plan, we also recognize that there's a good opportunity to look at a solution that has a lower carbon footprint and treats our solids in a different way. So to that end, we've been working on the planning and visioning for how we go about doing that. Today's presentation is part of that ongoing process. The act of replacing the solids handling down there is going to take many, many years, and we're still in the planning process. And we want to confirm the overarching guidelines and legacy statements and make sure that we're on the right track. So today's presentation is for information only, but we really are looking to see that we're on the right track and that the criteria we've identified do align with the council's vision. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric Johnston, and he'll set up the presentation.
Thank you. Eric Johnston with Public Works. With us today is Brian Matson from Carollo Engineers. Brian was with us for the secondary treatments process upgrade, but the lead consultant is Tad Giesbrecht. I can never get the name right, but Tad is the lead with Brown and Caldwell, so he'll be doing bulk of the presentation. We have 2 purposes today. One is to just give the council an update. We are intending to come back to council on a regular basis for this project. These projects take about 5 to 6, if not 8 years to develop and to get to construct, so it's important that we come back with you on a regular basis for what we're doing. They're also substantial in cost, and so we want to make sure that we have enough information to make good decisions when the time comes to do that. I want to just also reiterate a point that Ted made about the incineration. We have largely moved beyond that. In fact, we have moved beyond that, incineration is no longer considered a viable option for us to continue to have Post Point. As part of our due diligence in developing this project, we have gone through, as Tad will talk about, a very high-level screening of all the options that might be available, and have largely confirmed through that technical analysis at a very high level that indeed digestion is the best way for us to go, given the criteria that we are looking at. So as we talked about last October with the council, this effort by the consultant is narrowly focused to options and alternatives within the world of digestion. So we've looked at, the last several years, many different ways to deal with solids coming out of the plant, one of which is incineration, one is other types of technology. We've gone through the effort to just confirm that, yes, we are headed down the path of looking at digestion. So the primary purpose, one purpose today is to give background information, but the second purpose is to make sure that as we move forward and make decisions as a technical team, as we involve the public into the process, that we have the decision-making tools within the framework that's consistent with the policies that the council has established. So the triple bottom line plus methodology can sometimes be a little trite and overused. In this case, what we are trying very hard to do is have a very documented and measurable way to measure against the criteria for decisions that are very technical in nature. So how do we empower our technical team, our experts in the engineering side of things, to make decisions that are best for the city? We need to give them the ability to make those measurable decisions with our values in mind. So the triple bottom line plus that Tad will talk about and Brian will talk about are an effort to quantify those decisions, the ability to make decisions based on values and policies and commitments the city's made, and translate that into a very technical decision-making process. So with that, I will turn it over to Tad, and he can talk more about where we're at.
Good afternoon. I'm Tad Giesbrecht with Brown and Caldwell. So I want to start off here just giving an overview of the process that we're proposing to use to walk through this, decision-making, so that we're clear about that. So what we're talking about is moving from incineration, which you're well aware of today, aging incinerators, and then how are we going to get from this condition to a new process that better represents the city's values, and then addresses the issue of it reaching the end of its useful service life. So pretty simple two-step process here that we've summarized. So the first step that we went through is a very efficient process to just say, let's look at the world of alternatives and quickly screen those down to really just validate that decision of digestion. And so that process has happened. And so what we did there was develop pass-fail criteria that were really linked to the city's legacies and strategic commitments. And so looking at things like, is it a proven technology? Does it allow for resource recovery, which links to the climate action plan? Is it safe? So going through that kind of a process, we were able to pretty quickly get down to, yes, digestion is a good process for the city to move ahead with. And so that step one process is done. Moving into step two is going through the triple bottom line assessment. And there we're looking at different variations of digestion. So we still have to make decisions around how are we going to use the biogas that's produced from this process, where are we going to take the biosolids, how are those going to get used, where are we going to locate these facilities. So there are options within that that we need to subject to the TBL plus process. So next slide here, wanted to discuss TBL and define that a little bit. I think we're all very familiar with what triple bottom line is. So, of course, environmental, social, and financial being the triple part of that. And then the plus is adding in the technical component, which is getting at things like, is this a reliable technology? Is it proven? Things that the first three didn't necessarily capture. So went through the process of looking at the city's legacies and strategic commitments, and then pulling from those different components that related very directly to decision making that was required as part of the Biosolids project. Pulling those into these 4 different TBL plus criteria, and then developing individual criteria that Brian Mattson will talk about in some more detail that we're going to subject to these digester-related alternatives that we've landed at. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian to talk about the details behind each of these criteria.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Brian Mattson with Corolla Engineers. So as Tad mentioned, the sort of genesis for the criteria that fall within each of the categories of the triple bottom line plus process really was founded in the strategic goals and objectives of the city that you've adopted. But I want to point out that they also sort of link forward to the types of alternatives that we're going to be evaluating here. There's some very specific things that we want to be able to compare when we have alternative 1 versus alternative 2 in order to show measurable differences. And again, our goal is not necessarily to make a decision, but to develop enough information that relates to environmental, financial, social, and technical functions and features of these alternatives that you can make a good informed decision on behalf of the community. So real briefly, I'm not going to cover each of these criteria because you've seen them in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about specific criteria that exist. But I do want to point out that we have a pretty balanced number of criteria across all 4 of those categories. So we're really weighing cost and non-cost benefits and et cetera associated with each of these alternatives. And then again, I wanted to mention that, or just to reiterate, that those criteria are intended to be measurable against a performance standard that we've set. And so our goal here really is to tease out differences. We believe that the shortlisting process that we've gone through is going to give the city some really nice alternatives to compare. And our challenge here is to give you a fair apples-to-apples comparison of those alternatives so that you can really weigh the cost and non-cost advantages of each. And then this is a slide that some of you on council may be well familiar with. Ultimately, our objective here is to illustrate the trade-offs associated with each of these alternatives, as I said, so that you can make an informed decision. And it's not only based on the technical information that we're going to be presenting here, it's also going to be based on community input that we'll go out and solicit and receive. So I think it's really nice to have sort of an executive summary level comparison of the alternatives, and this was a slide that we presented a number of times that showed the various alternatives that we were looking at for the liquid stream. And it really showed, I think, ultimately where those trade-offs existed and helped the community kind of reach a recommendation on how to move forward with that process. And we'll look forward to implementing a similar type of strategy with the solids treatment. I mentioned the public and their role in this process. It's significant. Obviously, we're looking not only to inform the community about what it is that we're doing, but also to collect input and solicit feedback, primarily on how these alternatives are going to be evaluated against one another. So it's really important early on in a project like this to go out and get in front of the community and help them understand what it is that we are going to compare alternatives by, and get their input in terms of those criteria. Are we looking at the right things? Are we weighing these things in an appropriate fashion, et cetera? So there's a very talented group that's working with Tad and myself that's helping us develop a public involvement strategy. Involves City of Bellingham staff, obviously, in a key role there. And we've got a plan to get out in front of the community early and touch base with them at regular points to make sure that as we move forward that ultimately their goals and objectives for what they want to see the city become are reflected by this project. So that's the close of the technical presentation, and we'll be happy to answer questions.
Anything else? Okay. Or Ted?
No, that's it. I mean, we really just want to get feedback from council, and if there's more information you would like us to provide, we'd be happy to come back and do that, but really just want to seek your feedback at this point.
Thank you. Gene?
The last slide is key because we did that with the expansion.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of grumbling out there when it was first brought to council before your outreach, and once people understood exactly what we were doing over there and how it was going to impact everybody, it turned out good. So that I like that slide. That's a good one.
I guess I'd like to say that several years ago when we came forward with the expansion, it was the first time I saw this triple bottom line plus approach. I was very impressed with it. Now, I don't know, Brian, whether Carollo gets the credit for that or Public Works or both of you get to share the credit. I thought it was a very good way in the table you just showed. I think it makes a complicated decision very easy to make when you provide information in that kind of a framework. So I was very impressed with it last time. I think I'm going to enjoy it as much this time as well. Council members, anything else? This is April.
So I'll get over my little bit of humor with this. I have a 9 and 11-year-old, and as Michael, you were reading this, I circled the words bottom and brown because I knew my 9-year-old would be cracking up that we're talking about sewage, and we have those words right in the introduction. But I wanted to, because I heard something, and I want to make sure I heard it correctly when, was it Tad? Is it Tad or Ted? Tad. Okay, so as you were speaking, I think it was you were talking about the triple bottom line, used biogas, biosolids, and location, but it's my understanding we're not looking at different locations. Is that correct? That one's kind of off the table?
Well, Post Point will stay where it's at now, so the upgrades to the solids handling process will happen in that same general vicinity. We have some property adjacent to the plant right now, but where things are located within the property is something that needs to be considered. And the other aspect of it is there is a product that's created after you go through the digestion, and how do we want to deal with that? Is that something that's going to be trucked away, and if so, where does it go? Are we going to create a commodity out of it, something that can be sold? And so those are decisions that are all part of that digestion process, but the different alternatives within that. And I'll turn it over to Eric if he wants to expand on it, but those are some of the things that need to be considered.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, within the realm of digestion, there are a wide range of things to consider. And so as we have narrowed this down to digestion, we don't want to discount at this early point in the process any of those options. We are not proposing to move Post Point. Okay. However, as Ted astutely pointed out, there are products at the end of that digestion in a wide range of options, whether it's composted or pelletized or distributed onto agricultural fields, that need to be examined within the TBL Plus criteria. And so there's a potential for activities to occur with our solid handlings process that may not necessarily be tied physically to Post Point, but we want to examine that because there are pros and cons to each of the various options. And Tad, do you have anything to add to that? Or? Okay. One of the things we are also considering is there a regional benefit to looking at solids? So if we talk about digestion, that oftentimes comes up with dairy farms or with solid waste. We want to make sure that we're capturing those potential alternatives and looking at those and vetting those through that TBL Plus criteria. If we turn Post Point into a regional digestion center, does that result in trucks coming into Fairhaven? Or if you do off-site handling of the solids component, does that mean trucks going out of Fairhaven? So how do you find the balance point for all of those things that we want to do with the criteria against the community values, with all those things that we want to consider for the best of Bellingham?
Okay, so as far as location, I'm sure that you all are very aware of the heron habitat that's really close to there, and actually we've seen it improve over time, but I know that we're looking at changes, and you'll be talking about that with the community as we figure out how we're going to move forward. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And then that resource recovery, that's what you're talking about with this, right? So if we would have maybe had that thought or had the cost for the heat, we could have been capturing the heat maybe from incineration. So is that, when you're saying resource recovery, is that what you're looking at to make sure we're utilizing all of the product to the best to our ability?
Yes.
Okay.
We want to treat the wastewater system, particularly the solid side of that, not as a waste product. So we want to get rid of the term wastewater plant and turn to a resource recovery facility, right? So there's energy, there's nutrients, there's products that are available with that. In the 1970s, when the incinerators built, the incinerators were the most efficient in terms of cost and time and ability to remove that product. Right, so now as we look at it in a different time and age, we want to treat that as a resource and to manage that resource appropriately. How we do that, we have a long ways to go.
Terry?
Oh, just to comment on it. This is a process that's been going on for a while with the analysis, and I just really pleased with the analysis that's being done and the vehicle that you're using for that analysis. I think I like the direction it's heading with that in terms of at least all the elements that are being looked at and how it's being done. And yeah, I think it's...
Thank you. I think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to the third item, which is a letter of concern regarding the federal budget. Mayor Linville and the council have both expressed concerns regarding proposed federal funding levels, especially as it relates to housing and urban development funding levels that the city has traditionally received from the federal government. We have in our packet a letter to the city's federal representative that outlines these concerns. Brian Heinrich from the mayor's office is here. Would you like to say something?
Good afternoon, Brian Heinrich, mayor's office. The idea around sending a letter was born out of the conversation from the last meeting when we were talking about the updating the, I believe it was the HUD action plan. I think most of you are aware, or if not all of you are aware, that the president has proposed some pretty significant cuts to the block grant program in specific, zeroes that out moving forward. What we tried to capture in the letter is one, the amount that we receive and some of the projects that funds, and then there's a leveraging effect that occurs. What we're able to do with those dollars in the community is really expand their impact. And so this was the first draft. I know council expressed an interest in signing on, so would entertain whatever changes you would like to see or approval to sign and send, and we can prepare that and have the signatures attached.
Okay. Thank you. Council members? Dan, then Roxanne.
I do want to acknowledge the leveraging aspect that was detailed in this letter is very important, and I think it's important for folks in the community to understand that when the housing levy passed in 2012, that's a $21 million levy, but it's not just a box of $21 million that we can build out of. It leverages quite a bit more, and the HUD dollars are critical to that. If these items are zeroed out, this will take us backwards in terms of addressing what has been identified by everybody as the most important issue in our community, and that's ending homelessness. It also takes us backwards on the second most important issue, which is housing affordability, especially for people that are at the margins of society, essentially, who suffer the most through poverty. So it's very important that these programs don't go away, and that they're funded at least the current levels or more if that's possible. So I really appreciate the leveraging component that's been detailed in here.
Thank you. Roxanne?
I just moved to approve that the federal budget letter would be signed and sent.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the letter as written. Is there any further discussion on this? I guess I would add some information. Also in our packet is a table, scheduled expenditures of federal awards for the year that ended in December 31st of 2015, for which we had current numbers. And the federal funding at that point was over $11 million. It wasn't all the block grant funds we're talking about. It's all across the board, all the city functions that we do. In addition, we were also given this. It was not in the packet, it seems seems more detailed. Do you just want to indicate what else is in this table?
Yeah, my apologies. That was 2016. It's essentially a different format. Same look at federal awards, federal grants we received in 16. It's you're going to find a smaller number, and that's just kind of the way that it works. Some years we get, like in 15, 11 million. Last year in the neighborhood of about 5 million, I believe. In 17, I think when we close out 17, you'll see that there's will be an uptick, and that's related to some federal dollars we'll receive around transportation. So it's a bit of a moving target. And maybe I just go back to Dan's comment that being the way we approach, I want to say all the federal dollars we receive is that we do leverage them. We put them into use. They help make some projects whole. There's things we can certainly do without those federal dollars. We don't want to. It's much harder, as you all know, to do the same amount of things with less dollars. And so that handout was just reflective of 16. I wasn't able to get that in the packet in time, but I did want to give you a sense of what we're looking at in terms of federal funding.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion? April, go ahead.
No, I'm just interested in this and just taking it a step further. I think what we've realized is our vulnerability that we're not just subject to our own funds and state funds, but federal funds. And then as we're moving forward, especially looking at housing, that we're going to have some really difficult conversations on how do we really maximize the little a affordable housing getting built here, because it's possible that these funds can go away. And as you said in the letter, it impacts homelessness. So I think just as far as being a resilient community, many times people think of that only around like safety preparedness, but we need to look at being a resilient community on can we sustain ourselves within ourselves, certainly with some help on the outside, but not be so dependent. So I think as we move forward in the housing discussion, that will be important.
Okay, we have a motion before us, which, as I understand it, is for the City Council to approve signing this letter and sending to our federal delegation along with Mayor Linville's signature. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I did want to thank Samuel Lutz in our Planning Community Development Department who assisted with this. So
Samuel, great. Thank you. Okay, the next item will be approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes from March 27th.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the committee meeting minutes for March 27th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Next item, old and new business. Roxanne.
Just wanted to provide a quick fun story. So Elton Brown is a TV personality, and he recently did a show at the Mount Baker Theater. And as a result, he went to a few different businesses in Bellingham and posted about his experiences there on his Facebook page. And after that, Casa que Pasa almost sold out of potato burritos. And the Old World Deli kept selling out of their house-made pastrami. And so I just wanted to share that as a way that our investment in the Mount Baker Theater and with the work that the Mount Baker Theater does not only provides us great entertainment, but really supports our local business community.
Thank you. Anything else? I have 3 items, but you want to go ahead? Pinky?
I just wanted to let the council know that we have received official support from the Lummi Indian Business Council in regards to us using the Bellingham flag. So we have now crossed all the hurdles, I believe, in regards to adopting it. And I have a goal personally for the community. Is June 14th is International Flag Day. And I'm proposing that we adopt the Bellingham flag and we move forward with bringing a flag and hanging it or raising a flag on June 14th for Flag Day. So in that, I don't know if I need to go through a certain particular process because we've been talking about this all along the time, if I need to make a motion to approve the flag or if we need to go through an actual process.
Yeah, I was just talking with Mr. Rufato about this. He believes a shortened to the point resolution would be appropriate.
Okay.
So maybe the motion would be to direct the drafting of that resolution with regard to flying of the Bellingham flag.
Okay. So I would ask our city attorney office if you could please draft a resolution in regards to Bellingham, the city of Bellingham officially adopting the Bellingham flag and being able to raise that on Flag Day.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. I will say that I've also talked with Peter about the expenditure of public funds. You can get a Bellingham flag for $36 around town. I've been comparison shopping. If no one on the council minds, I think we could buy that flag out of council budget, assuming
I
we
was
approve.
willing to buy it out of my own budget, but I like that one
Okay.
better.
We can pass the hat for that one. So the motion is to direct staff to drop the proper ordinance for the Bellingham to fly the flag. We would purchase that and then hopefully fly it by June 14th, Flag Day. Any further discussion? April.
Is this officially adopting the flag, or is this just we're going to be flying the flag on Flag Day?
I'm asking to officially adopt the flag and raise it on Flag Day.
So you had mentioned you were going to be getting more community feedback through an internet survey. Do we have the results of that?
So we discussed that as a possibility, and that was put on hold because we did not have official support from the Lummi tribe. So, but what I have been receiving in regards to public feedback, I have not received one single concern. It's only been positive. So in regards to the public information that I have received, of course, I'm only one council member right now, but I'm out there talking to people about it. There has been no objection. So maybe that is something we could ask if there is objection, but I believe the community has shown extreme support. It has now flown in over 500 locations, and it's got huge representation in certain areas of the town. It already looks official, so I think it's time for us to step up and make it official.
Terry?
Yeah, I totally agree with Pinky with that. We've received a lot of feedback and other things about the support of it. It's being flown in different places. It's being flown in a number of states and in a number of countries right now. You know, residents of Bellingham are flying the flag, and in a number of places of that flag. And I've received no negative feedback on this particular one, because I think it's really well done. It's been nothing but positive. So, yeah, I totally support it.
Gene?
I had concerns, but you know, the other day I was stuck at the airport for a few hours. I'm wandering around. I haven't noticed it before, but the flag's there.
Yeah.
Now there's a picture underneath, Bellingham's flag. I mean, when people get off a plane, that's what they see. And Terry, remember, this is an issue that took off. Like a lot of issues we have in this community that take off and turn into something. Like farmers market was nothing when it started, and then it just took off. Well, this has taken off too, and I don't see why we shouldn't do it now, because it's Bellingham's flag whether we like it or not. So that's it. And it's the citizens have spoke. So.
Gene, that's the way I want it. I think when this first came up, remember I said, I want this to become so popular that we have no choice.
Yeah, I think
that it de facto already is the flag of Bellingham, and all we're doing is recognizing something which has occurred. And I think that's the point we're at. April?
I just want to confirm Ms. Ferris for our process. I'm totally in support, and I was with you that this should be more grassroots-led and to a point where we can't deny it. But as far as feedback and process, are we okay? Is this one of those things that we can do as a council body and not have to have a public hearing or anything like that? Over. I just want to confirm.
Yeah, Peter Raffato, Legal Department. So yeah, I don't think you need any additional process. I think you mentioned ordinance. I think it'd be a resolution. I think is what it's sounding more like. If that sounds okay, and it sounds like it would be official adoption, and I don't know if you want and a specified date, Flag Day, as a time to fly it. Is that what I'm hearing? Is what you want the resolution to say?
Yes, I believe so. Pinky?
That is my request, a resolution to officially adopt the flag and to fly it on June 14th, or raise it, I'm sorry, on June 14th on Flag Day.
And there are flag protocols, no flag flyers higher than the U.S. flag, so we'll follow all those
And Peter
rules.
did send a lot of information in regards to the legality of the flag and our processes, et cetera, and so
Thank you, Grizzly Raffato.
Okay, April?
Once you raise it, I'm assuming what I'm supporting is we're raising it and we're leaving it. Like this is going to be, yes, okay. Just want to confirm.
Yep. That's right.
So all those in favor of the motion to have this resolution drafted for our review signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. sorry, council rules of procedure. If that wasn't on, the mic wasn't on, that passed unanimously. Council rules of procedure, during the last retreat, we discussed some small changes to our rules of procedure. This is an ordinance we passed, or a resolution we adopted in 2014. These are some minor changes that Mr. Rufato has written. Some of them simply include language on how and when you can use signs in the council chambers that don't disrupt, clarifying about public comment rules as they apply for hearings, as well as during the public comment period, when they will occur. For example, if we have special presentations, like our annual employee recognition, public comments comes after that. Let me see, moving some language. It had to do with what happened recently when there's changes made on third and final. If there's significant changes, they just come forward to the committee of the whole. So if we want to review them, we can have a time on the agenda to do that. So I don't know if we want to just simply, you've just never had a chance to look at this before. This is more an FYI. This will be in our packet if there's no objection at the next meeting. Okay, so that'll happen the next meeting. And then finally, town hall topic. Also at the retreat, we talked about hosting a town hall. We ran out of time and energy, I think, to decide on a town hall topic. We need to do that. Pretty soon we'll start putting up the word that we're going to have an informal town hall topic. We'll decide on what kind of speakers or format will be there. We have a location picked out already, but we need a topic. The idea was to wait until we're close to the time. We'd have a timely topic. I can think of a very timely topic myself personally, but are there other ideas, or shall I just suggest my topic? My topic is that right now we're looking at the issue of homeless and homeless shelters. And it's a very important decision, and we're getting a lot of feedback on it. It's going to be a big decision. I think we're all in favor of a homeless shelter, but there are location issues that I think we're going to want to give people a chance to talk about in public. Roxanne.
I'd also like to add, not enough people understand what we're already doing for homeless support, so I would love it if it would include that also.
Okay, so the focus would be the new homeless shelter, but also broaden it to the homeless issues and homeless projects already underway. I'm sorry, who? Okay.
Oh, okay.
She was waiting.
Pinky?
My subject for topic is housing, which includes, I believe, people who are unsheltered, which gives us a broader and maybe taking a look at housing solutions is my
Okay.
topic suggestion.
Okay. Dan?
I think those are two big subjects, and there are different aspects to both of them. I wouldn't have an objection to having both of them in the same meeting. I just would want to recognize that they're pretty significant subjects. The other piece to that, as it relates to the homeless or folks who are experiencing homelessness component, is that I would want to have, I think, some expertise in the room in terms of from the mayor's office, but also from maybe provider community, maybe just a few providers in there to maybe help us answer some technical questions that are beyond our expertise.
Okay, I'm seeing some general agreement on this. So to the public, the idea is that we're going to be having, as part of our, just a second, Brian, our increased public outreach and communication with the public, have a town hall event. It's not like a city council meeting, no votes, no business. The idea is to have a few, as you say, experts in the room. So the city council will be talking a bit, but mostly listening and also hearing from not only the public, but from experts. Kind of a conversation that moves around the room is, I think, my expectation. Is that sound about right? Dan, and then I'll get to you, Brian.
And just to add, beyond the mayor's office staff, but also perhaps staff from planning and community development, that would make sense to me since they're working on these topics and issues.
I was just going to offer the same and sort of tying into Roxanne's comments about what we currently do. I think there's a story to be told there, and I would really appreciate council wanting this to be the topic, and would offer that we'd like to help however we can, so that whether it's presentation or information sharing, however we can support that effort, would like to do that.
April?
I think that Pinky brings up a good point, and it's what a lot of the journal articles, a lot of the things that I'm reading in media say. You can't have a conversation about anything without a conversation about housing, because it's all related. And so I like the idea of Roxanne's or I think it was yours, Michael, of focusing on what we're doing in order to deal with, the issue of homelessness. But Pinky, I agree that it needs to at least be a lead-in as to how our current housing model is causing, and our current system and institution, because that's the problem. The homelessness, to me, if we focus on that, we really lose an opportunity to say this is a symptom. This is just a symptom of a greater problem, and then how are we going to be fixing those institutional and systematic problems, which housing is a huge part of that. So I would want us to really focus on it being a symptom instead of really focusing in on the problem. I'll wait. I'll have my second.
Roxanne?
My little hope is that it would consist of whomever or whatever information we want to present to the entire community, maybe some Q&A, but definitely like I've seen us do with other events in the past where there are tables set up for different organizations or sections of our departments so people can float around and learn more if they want to.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we'll want a significant kind of informational component, but not losing sight of the town hall conversational aspect of it as well. Brian, is that? Oh.
Well, it is. I know Rick has a couple of things I think he wants to bring up about this particular topic and whether or not the town hall forum is the appropriate venue. Mm-hmm. If we're going to talk about the homeless shelter specifically, if it's going to be broader and maybe more around housing issues or housing affordability, that might change how we approach this. So
it sounds like it's going to be a broader discussion, and whether and where we locate a shelter now is seen more as a component of the discussion rather than the focus, if I'm understanding what I'm hearing up here. Mr. Sepler?
Well, certainly we're interested in hearing concerns from community members and suggestions regarding the broader issue of homelessness. We welcome the opportunity to get good feedback and talk about the issues. However, there's a specific proposal pending in front of this body, and that proposal will be the predominance of comment one will receive. In essence, you're scheduling a de facto public hearing on that proposal, and you'll hear proponents testify in favor, and those who are opposed testify in favor. To me, that's a hearing, not a town meeting. And I think it's very hard to segregate out the issues. To say, no, we're staying up here because we don't screen people before they speak. We want them to have the right venue. If council is interested in hearing feedback, you could schedule time in these chambers to do that on that matter. But if you're able to craft an agenda that's broader, I still think it's going to be very challenging to be able to keep it from turning into that, here's what I think in favor, here's why it's opposed.
I think one of the ideas is this would be a little bit outside the official process, but it does sound like, and we're talking about May, that it might be important to include kind of a parallel, more official discussion of the process you say is already underway. In other words, we might, on our agenda in the next month or so, have something relevant to that as well as the town hall, rather than, we're not going to accomplish our official business at that town hall. That's not what it's for. I'm hearing from you that there will be other things that probably do need to take place more like in this venue on a more official footing. Am I hearing you correctly?
It's your meeting, and certainly the ability to do that. My concern on the May date is if we are before you in the next couple of weeks to seek permission to negotiate a leasehold, then we need to come back and present that, and that would probably be a coincident or close proximity to that meeting. And that was the issue that worried.
Yeah, I guess I would suggest that that needs to go forward on its own natural timeline and not be yoked to the town hall. Does that make sense?
If it precedes the town hall, then this issue is moot, and my concern are unwarranted because we will discuss the broader issues. However, not knowing how those reviews and discussions will go with this body, there is a potential that it is not resolved fully by that time, though we'd hope to be in front of you in May, perhaps, with something to consider. I think you could see where my concern might be, and I ask that you have reserved flexibility to address it rather than creating an outside process to deal with something that should be inside.
I agree. We're not trying to create a separate process. We need to be mindful of that. April.
Well, I appreciate, and I think that's where my concern was, is that it's going to get co-opted into, split aisles and people. We have a real opportunity here to set a precedent of what a real town hall would look like for this council. And if we pick something that's too close to an issue that's right on the table, that's getting ready to make a decision, we might have a really unintended consequences is bringing people back to kind of that old way of us and them of coming together. To me, this is exploring some big issues that we know are coming forward, like housing, which impact homelessness. So I would rather keep it at that high level and talk about you have the Strong Town came through, so you could have a panel of like, what did that mean? What is the missing middle? That's a whole new term that's coming out, and how does that impact all these issues? But I do agree with Rick that we have to be extremely careful, especially since this body did not move forward to have that lease. So we're still a little bit behind the ball on that. So I say let's keep it broader, housing base, which is going to hopefully be our focus in 2018. And homelessness will come under that.
Terry?
Yeah, I was just thinking, if we're doing homelessness as a topic, I do agree not doing it on this shelter, but looking at the different models, looking at and discussion of the housing first model and some of the other models that are out there, so we can explore that in a broader way. Because for many people, this housing shelter, this is definitely just a Band-Aid. That's not going to solve the housing problem. Looking at models like Housing First and things, some people think is the way to move forward to actually make the dent in that solution. So broaden it out if we're going to do homelessness, not on whether we should have a shelter and what location, but on the broader sense of homelessness and causes. But it's not just housing. It's got to do, look at the housing, and the homelessness problem really was exacerbated with that last depression that we had, and we never recovered. And the numbers went up. The economy and jobs and money to pay for rent and other things never recovered. So it's all tied in on multi-levels with it. So we could have that kind of discussion in a town hall if we don't focus on just the shelter.
Gene?
Yeah, another cautionary move, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have people show up at this town hall meeting that want to comment on something that's not on the table, too, because I've hosted town hall meetings many, many years ago. I tried to do it specifically on items, but then everybody got up and started talking about other things, so you're going to have to confront that some way. If somebody comes up and starts talking, I've watched some of the town hall meetings on healthcare, and they turned into, other than they were shouting all sorts of things, so it could be interesting. The sad thing about it is I'll be out of town on that date, so I'll be watching it. Hopefully you'll be taping it live. But no, seriously, you might have to do something about the rules of speaking that night.
So we've never done a town hall, at least not recently.
I don't think we've done one in a long time.
It's a bit of an experiment in increasing communications. What I'm hearing is a sense that it should be more broadly on the issue of housing affordability, how that affects homelessness, not a referendum on a particular topic. We want to have some information there, but definitely leave room for conversation and Q&A. What I guess I would do is maybe if the council would like, I'll work with Brian, maybe Mr. Steppler. We'll work a little bit more on the details of how we might format this, who we might invite. Does that sound appropriate? And then I'll report back to the rest of the council on sort of where we're going with it. Okay. Anything else under old and new?
I just a comment on that.
April?
I'd like the council to consider leaving the second town hall for this year open to the library, potentially the library, and this body having a joint meeting, especially because we're going to be going over some of the ideas of how to fund our library and what's going forward. So if we could keep that placeholder for that, I'd really appreciate that as liaison for the library. And I'm just going to put my last plug. I know I already said it 3 times, but as you all move forward, I think you should strongly hear what Rick is saying. I think when we're moving through a homeless shelter and then you say we're going to have a town hall on homelessness, there's nothing you can do that's going to stop people from thinking that you're having a town hall around that. So I would strongly urge that we use something like housing or systemic issues that are causing these problems so that we can ourselves learn more with the community as what are these system and institutional problems that are going on that are creating these problems for us. Keeps it broad, and I think takes away the ambiguity.
Dan?
Just one item for old and new, and I'll keep it quick with an eye towards the time. I've been working on a program with others to address people who are chronic high utilizers of systems, so people that use courts, jails, are in contact with our police or fire just way too frequently and then use systems in inappropriate ways. So tomorrow morning, this program is meeting for the first time with a broader community in terms of providers, so judges, prosecutors, police, fire, social workers, case managers, people from the nonprofit community to kind of roll this thing out. And this is called the GRACE program, ground level response and coordinated engagement. And so I'll report back the results of that meeting and another follow-up meeting. This is going to take place over the course of a month. So I will report back to this body in terms of what this program ends up looking like. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, I just want to make one last comment on the housing thing. What also will turn into, when we talk about housing, is it'll also be discussion of growth and GMAs and zoning. That's another thing that will come out. I think that's going to be fine, like it or not. I don't think we should try to control this too much. After all, we are there to listen and hear and learn. Okay, that finishes our meeting things. We now go into executive session. We have, let me see, 3 items in executive session, totaling approximately 30 minutes. The first 2 have to do with collective bargaining agreements with city employees, and the third matter is potential property acquisition. I will come back and reconvene the meeting at approximately 3:30. We're now in recess.